Good morning and welcome to AM Agenda. After months of opposing everything the government has done, we've seen a repositioning from Tony Abbott. He says he wants to be constructive and won't necessarily block the government's hospital overhaul.
The Coalition will not necessarily oppose the government's public hospital changes, provided they don't boil down to yet another great big new bureaucracy.
And welcome this morning in Melbourne, the Shadow Minister for Innovation and Industry, Sophie Mirabella, and in the studio, the Parliamentary Secretary for Employment, Jason Clare. Good morning to you both.
G'day, mate.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Jason, first to you. Was this a surprise? Tony Abbott wants to be constructive when it comes to this hospital overhaul after being critical of it for a few weeks?
It was a surprise to me. I'm sure it was probably a surprise to many people, but I hope he's genuine. The people of Australia have made it clear they want us to work together on this. They want us to fix the health system, and the overwhelming majority of Australians support Kevin Rudd's plan, and they want the opposition to support it. So I hope he's genuine. I've got to say there's a cynic in me that says, what's going on here? You know, is this another flip-flop? You know, he's flip-flopped on climate change. He's flip-flopped on taxes. He said he'd be no new taxes. Now there is. He's flip-flopped on paid parental leave. This is another flip-flop. He opposed this before we even announced it. He said in Parliament 2 weeks ago that he opposed most of it. Today he's saying that he supports it because most of it's his plan. So it's hard to tell, but I guess the point I want to make is I hope he's genuine because Australians want us to work together on this. They want us to implement this plan. Let's hope he's genuine.
Sophie, is this a move to diffuse what was looming as a strong election point for Kevin Rudd?
No, absolutely not. What Tony Abbott said, and he's certainly no Kim Beazley, Jason, but what Tony Abbott said was that when the government releases details of its reform package, and if they're beneficial for Australia, we won't stand in the way of preventing those, and that's a perfectly common sense approach. Of course Australians want hospitals fixed. We've seen the disastrous mismanagement and wastage of billions of dollars by state Labor governments. They want the problems fixed, but there are also many questions, and even Mr BRUMBY has said there are dozens of questions that haven't been answered, and the real issue is, when are we going to stop getting policy on the run? When are we going to stop having uncosted policies like a $43 billion NBN without a business plan? And when are we going to have a government, a Prime Minister, who is prepared to make hard decisions, hard reform decisions for the benefit of Australia and the future of Australians and their families? Well, and that's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for details.
Okay, as we mentioned earlier, Tony Abbott did point to some similarities between the government's hospital network and his own ideas of the past for local boards. Let's recap a little bit more of what the Liberal leader said yesterday.
In this area, the challenge is to convert good intentions into meaningful improvements for patients. The government's local hospital networks could turn out to be a variant of the local boards that have long been coalition policy.
Sophie, if there were those similarities, why was he so scathing of the plan at the outset?
Well, we haven't seen details. Health reform is a huge area. It's in the top 5 of concerns for most Australians. Health and getting adequate, safe and timely health care and their needs attended to. So it's not just about one aspect of hospital boards, it's right across the board, and Tony Abbott as opposition leader is well within his realm of responsibility to say, listen, this is an area of concern. Yes, we won't stand in the way of beneficial changes, but tell us what the changes are going to be. Look, you can't give a government, particularly this government, that can't even put fluff in people's roofs, you can't give them carte blanche with hundreds of millions of dollars, let alone billions of dollars. Well, you've got to see the detail, because I have to tell you, I'm getting calls from people in my electorate, and whenever I travel around Australia in my parliamentary capacity, people are coming up to me and saying, why won't these people start being responsible?
Okay,
if I ran my business like that, I'd be out of business or I'd be sacked as an employee. And people are very, very concerned.
Sophie's calling for more detail. She's not the only one. The Victorian Premier, John Brumby, also wants more detail. The Prime Minister held talks with him yesterday. is holding talks again with him this morning, pretty much as we speak. And Mr Rudd, though, yesterday said they had made some progress.
We are moving through the outstanding areas of disagreement one by one. I believe that we are making some progress. Of course, Premier Brumby will speak for himself, as he should. I don't underestimate the problems that we've still got to work our way through, but that's why we'll continue to keep talking. And as I said, with the objective of resuming those discussions as early as tomorrow, or in any case, some stage soon.
Yeah, as early as tomorrow, i.e. today, and they're resuming this morning. Jason, that's the problem that remains, isn't it? I mean, you might have Tony Abbott on board now, it seems, but the state premiers are yet to be convinced. As Sophie says, they want more detail. Yeah, they haven't been given it.
Look, I think Australians would expect to see their Prime Minister speaking to every Premier, involved in lots of meetings to go through all of the detail. Health reform...
But we still don't even know who's responsible under the system, where the buck stops. This is something that John Brumby's having to negotiate. How could this not have been secured from the outset with Nicola Roxon and the Prime Minister?
Well, the local hospital networks are the ones who will run the budgets for those systems. That's very clear.
But which minister? Do they then...
Well, in terms of financial control, it's the federal minister.
Yeah, but then it's split, so the blame game doesn't end.
No, see, where the blame game began was because of the changing amount of money that the federal government would put in. Sometimes it'd be 45%, and under the Howard government it dropped to 40%. What the Bennett report said is the real blame between the two levels of government was because the federal government didn't maintain a set percentage. That's why 60% and guaranteeing that the federal government will always put in 60% helps to end the blame game. The other problem was we would give the states a bucket of money and then you can't guarantee that they would use that money effectively to run the health system. Instead now, they'll be paid a set amount based on the services they provide. So they're the two big changes to eliminate the blame and the cost shifting that happened between the two areas. But I don't underestimate the size of this challenge. Health reform's always difficult. Medicare was hard. The Liberal Party tried to oppose it 4 times before we eventually got it through. But doctors support this, nurses support it.
And Tony Abbott supports it as well. And the thing is, the Kevin Rudd's been able to walk around, the Prime Minister's been able to wander around the country, appearing the statesman above the fray almost on health. But now Tony Abbott says, all right, I'll see you on that. Does that diffuse this issue for you politically in terms of the benefit you'd have?
It's not about politics, Kieran. This is about fixing the health system. Otherwise, the Prime Minister wouldn't be working so hard talking to every Premier to get them on board. Now, if Tony Abbott's on board, terrific. But when you hear Sophie picking it to pieces, it makes you think, well, is this going to stand up in the longer term, or is this just Tony Abbott making political points?
Jason, it's asking questions, mate. It's questions. What you're saying, Jason, is that we have to be blind and give your government carte blanche. That's insane, that's crazy, that's irresponsible. It is our responsibility to ask for details and to ask for questions to test what the government is saying, because
I agree.
Look at what you've done. Look at what you've done with the home insulation problem. It's probably going to cost more money to actually fix the problems and to make homes safe than the insulation program itself. Look at the schools program, where it was supposed to cost $1 billion to give students in certain years computers. It's now blown out to $2 billion, and only 20% have computers. Look at schools across the country that are pleading with Julia Gillard, please don't knock down our existing buildings just to rebuild them in your image. Let us use the money for something else. You guys can't be trusted with managing billion-dollar programs. So if you're telling me that we're supposed to sit back, lame, mute and not ask questions, well, it's not on, Jason. We want to fix problems in Australia and we want to help you, but you can't expect us to give you carte blanche.
Sophie, you sound like Tony Abbott.